In the shadows where truth and tales intertwine, we find the thrilling, the chilling, the downright spine-tingling. From the paranormal to the peculiar, every echo has a story. Dare to delve into the unexpected, the unexplained? Brace yourself, for you're about to embark on a journey where fear meets fascination. Stay tuned if you dare, for stories that will make your heart race and your mind ponder. Welcome to the realm of the eerie, the realm of the unknown. And remember, like and subscribe, if you dare. It was a cold, dark night in 1968. I was huddled over my paperwork when the phone rang. It was John, a young park ranger, his voice trembling with fear. My name is Dennis, a retired FBI agent, and this is my story. John, a rookie ranger I had met last year, sounded frantic. I had given him my number with clear instructions to call me if he ever stumbled upon anything peculiar. Tonight was that night. He was nervously recounting a tale about a senior ranger named George who had gone to investigate reports of a woman crying in the forest. As the story unfolded, the hairs on the back of my neck began to rise. John relayed how George had instructed him to stay behind and to contact me immediately if he didn't return. John's voice was shaky, the fear palpable. I could sense his anxiety, his worry for his senior ranger. I tried to reassure him, to calm his nerves. I told him to sit tight, to wait for me. I happened to be stationed only an hour away that night, so I promised to get there as quickly as I could. I was no stranger to the strange and unexplained, but something in John's voice told me that this was different. As I hung up the phone, my mind was racing. What could have happened to George? What was this crying woman in the forest? And why was John so terrified? Every fiber of my being was on high alert as I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. Yet, I knew I had to help. I had to find out what was going on. I got into my car, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drove through the dark, ominous night, the words echoed in my head. A woman crying in the forest. I had no idea what I was about to encounter, but I knew one thing for certain. I told John to sit tight. I was on my way. An hour later, I found John outside the ranger station, his face pale. I asked him to lead me to the scene. The air was heavy with tension as we made the trek to the campsite. The only sounds were the crackle of leaves under our boots and the foreboding hoots of an owl in the distance. We arrived at the campsite to find a terrified couple, their flashlight darting across the dark forest, as if they were expecting something to jump out at them. I approached them and asked about George. Their faces turned paler as they recounted their chilling encounter with a woman perched on a nearby log. A woman who, when they tried to comfort her, turned to reveal she had no face. The mere thought sent a shiver down my spine. They continued their tale, explaining how they quickly retreated and called the ranger station. When George arrived, they watched him from the safety of their tent as he approached the faceless woman. But then, she darted into the forest, and George, without a second thought, ran after her. They had no idea where he was now. I exchanged a glance with John, both of us knowing we had to find George. But this was no ordinary search mission. We were dealing with something unexplainable, something that defied all logic. I could see the fear in John's eyes, but I knew we couldn't let it paralyze us. With a stern voice, I instructed the couple to remain inside their tent. John and I ventured into the forest, torches in hand. The beam of our torches cut through the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows on the forest floor. We followed the shoe prints we assumed were George's, leading us deeper into the forest and further into the unknown. The forest was eerily quiet as we followed the trail of shoe prints. Then we found George standing alone in a clearing. The towering trees around us seemed to close in, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out in the moonlight. George was stiff as a statue, his eyes reflecting the silver glow of the moon, unblinking, staring into the depths of the forest. "George! George!" I shouted, but it was like he was in another world. His trance was so deep, so impenetrable, he could have been a wax figure in a museum display. We approached him cautiously, the leaves crunching under our feet. I put my hand on his shoulder, his body cold and rigid. I gave him a firm shake, and finally he snapped back to reality. His eyes, once vacant, now filled with terror. "We need to get out of here," he managed to whisper, his voice barely audible over the whispering wind. "It's not safe." Before we could ask him what he meant, a giggle echoed around us. It was a chilling sound, a woman's giggle, but twisted, warped into something that sent shivers down our spines. It was as if the forest itself was laughing at us. We froze, the sound bouncing off the trees, enveloping us from all sides. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The giggle turned into a cackle, a mocking sound that filled the air. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, a chill running down my spine. We were not alone in this forest, and whatever was out there with us was not friendly. George's words echoed in my ears. "It's not safe." And then we ran. We bolted through the forest, the trees blurring past us, the woman's giggle following us, taunting us. We didn't know where we were heading, but we knew we had to get away from the eerie laughter, away from the trance, away from the forest. The giggling echoed around us, growing louder and more sinister with each step we took. The sound was not of joy, but rather a macabre jest, a predator toying with its prey. It was the woman, her laughter now turning into a bone-chilling screech that pierced the night. Dennis, John, and George found themselves ensnared in the heart-stopping race with an unseen terror. The forest around us was no longer a tranquil sanctuary. It had transformed into an ominous labyrinth, the shadows stretching and contorting with each passing moment. We were running, our breaths ragged, our hearts pounding against our chests. Each rustling leaf, each snapping twig seemed to be the woman, her presence ubiquitous yet invisible. Suddenly, the forest's snaking tendrils opened up to reveal a path, the exit, safety. But the sight that met our eyes froze us in our tracks. The woman was there, waiting for us. Her silhouette against the moonlit opening. She was no longer an elusive specter, but a tangible figure, a malevolent entity barring our escape. The woman's silhouette began to alter, her body dropping down, her limbs contorting in a grotesque dance of shadows. The sight was terrifying, a nightmare unfolding in front of our eyes. The sounds of cracking joints filled the silence, each snap a cruel symphony resonating with our escalating fear. We stood anchored, our eyes transfixed on the woman's contorting figure. The terror had its icy grip around our hearts, the reality of our predicament sinking in. We were trapped, the woman standing between us and our escape, her laughter now replaced with an eerie silence that was just as menacing. The woman was no longer a distant threat, but a palpable danger. Her twisted form a testament to the horror that had been chasing us. She was a shadow brought to life, a chilling reminder of the fear that had been gnawing at us since our encounter at the campsite. We froze in our tracks, the woman's silhouette contorting in front of us. The shadows were no longer just the absence of light, but a horrifying entity, a chilling spectacle that had us trapped in its macabre embrace. I pulled out my gun, my hand trembling. The woman rushed towards us, her body contorting in ways that were humanly impossible. Her joints snapped, her body twisted and turned, as if none of the laws of biology applied to her. She was a nightmarish figure that seemed to have leaped straight out of a horror story, her eerie giggle still echoing in the chilling night air. I steadied my trembling hand, my focus narrowing down to the woman. The forest around us seemed to fade into oblivion, the only sound being the frantic beating of my heart. My finger found the trigger, squeezing it gently as I prepared to do what had to be done. The deafening sound of the gunshot filled the night, followed by another and another. Each shot seemed to echo around the forest, the sound ricocheting off the trees. The woman stumbled, my bullets finding their mark. She fell to the ground, her body lying still amidst the fallen leaves. She was no longer the terrifying creature that had chased us through the forest, her body no longer contorting in that horrifying manner. We approached her cautiously, the fear still lingering in our hearts. Turning her over, we braced ourselves for the faceless horror we had expected to see. But to our surprise, it was a normal face that met our gaze, a face that had no traces of the terror it had instilled in us. Her joints were normal, her body showing no signs of the contortions we had witnessed. The faceless woman, the creature that had hunted us in the forest, was gone. In her place was a regular woman, her body lifeless and devoid of any signs of the horror we had just experienced. It was as if the nightmare had ended as abruptly as it had begun. I looked at John and George, their faces mirroring my confusion. The faceless woman was gone, leaving behind only a chilling memory. And so, our tale of the Campfire Horrors comes to an end. Until next time, sleep tight. Before we part ways, dear viewers, Remember to stay vigilant. The campfire horrors may have been extinguished for now, but the embers of the unknown always remain. As you lay down to sleep tonight, don't forget the lessons from our tale. Safety is but a fleeting moment in a world of unseen. So if you've enjoyed this journey into the abyss, don't forget to ring that bell and smash that like button. Do it before the thing under your bed decides to pay you a visit. Oh, and keep those night lights on. You never know what might be lurking in the dark. Thank you for embarking on this terrifying adventure with us, until our paths cross again in another tale of the unknown. Goodbye and sweet dreams, if you can.